party here in these United States. But he did throw some shade Clinton's way, calling the leaked DNC emails a public service and suggesting that Clinton's nomination victory against Bernie Sanders wasn't quite on the up and up.
Does it even matter who hacked this data from the campaign headquarters of Mrs. Clinton? The important thing is the content that was given to the public, specifically that the campaign headquarters worked in the interests of one of the candidates, in this case Mrs. Clinton, rather than equally for all of the Democratic Party candidates.
The Clinton campaign responded today with a statement that read in part, quote, "Unsurprisingly, Putin has joined Trump in cheering foreign interference in the U.S. election that is clearly designed to inflict political damage on Hillary Clinton and Democrats." Margaret, the Clinton people got that statement out pretty quickly. This was a big interview for our news organization and for our friend John Micklethwaite. As I say, the Clinton campaign jumped all over this interview, and it does kind of extend, I think, the storyline of the notion of Vladimir Putin maybe in league with Donald Trump, at least in principle, if not practice, kind of colluding to put their thumb on the scale and try to get involved in this American election. How much do you think that these statements by Putin further that storyline, and the extent to which you think that the Clinton campaign will try to play that to their advantage?
Yeah, I do think they're going to continue to try to play it to their advantage. Once we get past this Labor Day hurdle, we'll see a lot more focus on the economy and on domestic issues, certainly. But when you see reports about people like Henry Kissinger, George Shultz saying that they're not going to be endorsing now in this race, when you look at all of the Republicans and national security experts who have raised questions about Donald Trump, American attitudes about Russia, about WikiLeaks, and some of Trump's provocative statements in the past, the Clinton campaign thinks that this is a winning talking point to talk about and to raise questions about whether Trump is, because he's not the Republican establishment, who he's really representing, who he's working for. They do think that's an effective tack.
Look, here's the reality. The reality is that according to every computer expert that has ruled on this matter, it seems like the DNC leaked emails were hacked by Russian security services or those affiliated with Russian security services. It's been clear for a long time that Vladimir Putin prefers Donald Trump to Hillary Clinton. This is a pretty brazen thing, I think, he did with John Micklethwaite in this interview. And if we see, as Julian Assange has promised, if we see more hacked emails that come out, especially really damaging ones, the question of what the involvement was of Russia, how much Putin really is trying to influence this American election is going to be a big question this October. And this has just kind of set the stage for what I think could be a very, very explosive element of the fall campaign. All right. Donald Trump is heading to Detroit tomorrow, where he will visit a black church as part of his ongoing effort to reach out to minority voters. Apparently, his campaign is a little nervous about the trip. The New York Times is reporting that Trump's scheduled Q&A with a local African-American pastor, which is going to be recorded and released by the campaign, or was going to be, was entirely scripted. The paper got its hands on 8 pages of pre-approved questions and carefully worded answers that aides were proposing for Trump, covering sensitive topics like police killings, racial tension, and the perception among some black voters that Trump is racist. After that New York Times story was posted last night, the Trump campaign said the nominee's plans had changed. He'll apparently now address the church congregation for a few minutes after the Q&A and also visit some neighborhoods around Detroit with Ben Carson. So, Margaret, we've been talking about Trump's ostensible outreach to minorities and African-American voters for the past couple of weeks, so we kind of understand the politics of it. But it seems like every time Trump takes a step forward here, somehow he ends up taking 3 steps back. Is this just finally kind of the final pre-nail in the coffin on this potential effectiveness of this outreach effort?
Yeah, I mean, it's unclear whether he's actually really trying to pump up his numbers in terms of African-American supporters. This has, to a large extent, been about appealing to white voters in the center who are concerned that he isn't sensitive enough to racial issues. And the whole problem with scripted questions and answers is that then it seems like a campaign ploy or a campaign tactic rather than a genuine interest in getting to have a back and forth and understand what the issues are. So I think he's probably put himself into a difficult corner here if the audience that he is really trying to reach are that sort of centrist block of voters who don't like Hillary Clinton but are not convinced that he's sensitive to these issues.
Look, I mean, if you have a surrogate, as was the case with Donald Trump a couple days ago, who puts out a tweet with Hillary Clinton in blackface, that's bad. This, I think, is worse in some respects, because I think you're right, and we've talked about it a lot on the show. A lot of this minority outreach, ostensible minority outreach, is about trying to reassure white, college-educated voters in suburban swing states that Trump is not as racially insensitive as he has seemed at sometimes. This is sort of the ultimate tell. It's like, I'm going into the African-American community, and I care so little about it, and I'm so uncomfortable speaking to it that I need to have the entire event pre-scripted. For white college-educated voters, what could be more offensive in some ways? I mean, there are many things that can be more offensive, but it sort of speaks to the whole thing being a sham, and I think that puts him in a deeper hole than even the one he started out in, and that hole was pretty deep to begin with.
Just sort of one more thought on this is that once you get beyond all of this, is it working in terms of his appeal to white voters? It's still the United States of America, and you still can't win a general election if that's all you got. So beyond that kind of core question of the center that we're talking about comes the question of African-American vote, Hispanic vote, women voters.
Incredibly dumb and condescending thing to do. All right, when we come back, two West Coast strategists weigh in on the presidential race. That conversation and more after these words from our sponsors. Welcome back. Since I'm here in L.A., I figured I'd catch up with two famed political strategists who live here. Bob Shrum, who's worked with the likes of Al Gore and John Kerry, and Mike Murphy, who most recently ran Jeb Bush's super PAC, Right to Rise. We started out talking about what to expect from this final stretch of the general election. Traditionally in politics, Labor Day is the start of the general election. This summer has felt like the general election started a long time ago, right? So does Labor Day now mean anything?
Yeah, I think it's the end of the election.
Right.
I think we're going to look back and say that this period from the Republican convention, Democratic convention, the aftermath, the Trump tweets, the attacks, his ridiculous performance this week on immigration, first in Mexico and then in Phoenix. I think we're going to look back on it and say that's when the election was decided.
Right.
He didn't have much of a chance to begin with, I don't think, but this was a really fateful period.
Do you think the election's over, basically?
I do.
And you?
Well, I've called him a zombie for a long time, politically dead, yet still moving.
Yes, but you called him that back when he was competing with all of his the people in the Republican Party, including your guy,
Well,
and you were wrong then.
Context, I said he'll never be president of the United States. He look that up.
But you used the zombie thing back when he was still very much alive.
No. I'm going to fight you on this because I used the zombie thing because I thought he'd never make it to president. I didn't think he'd win the nomination, but you never know. Yeah. I'm sure he won't win the presidency.
I take your point. I think it's right. These elections do get decided earlier and earlier. That was true in the 12 cycle. It's probably true in this cycle. A lot of stuff gets set in stone. Is it like beyond the debates? Is there the post-Labor Day period, is there any kind of meaning to that? That like, well, we turn the corner and now there's going to be a different character to the campaign, there's going to be a different texture to it?
Well, first, it's clear Trump is never going to pivot. I hate using the word. Yeah. Trump is going to be Trump. He's going to keep tweeting. He's going to keep going off his prompter script. By the way, he is a zombie when he reads a prompter. I mean, he really doesn't know how to do it. Right. So he knows that the crowd knows it, and he goes off and says something crazy. He needs the debates. He desperate, if there's anything he needs or could help him, would be that first debate, because he has to pass the threshold of acceptability as a potential president and a potential commander-in-chief. I don't think he can do it. I think the debates actually could make his situation worse. For Lord's sake, his idea of preparing is to sit around with Chris Christie or Rudy Giuliani and Laura Ingraham and
Roger Ailes, Steve Bannon. Like, what a cool guy. That's a fun kind of Sunday brunch crowd, right?
He doesn't want to practice.
Yeah, Ailes could help him, but what I think will happen is Trump will keep doing what Trump has done. He will react to the daily news cycle and try increasingly maniacal things to try to make himself feel he's doing better in the polls, which are his big touchstone of what he thinks is going on in the public polls. Right. So he will just keep spinning along, ricocheting between ideas like this crazy trip to Mexico.
There's a big moment, the immigration speech and the trip to Mexico. It's a kind of a landmark thing. This is a key issue for him. They previewed it in a variety of kind of complicated ways, but they made a big deal out of it. This was not something that kind of was a spontaneous moment. This isn't some, they planned this speech, right? And then he went and gave it. Why? I don't understand if he was going to end up in exactly the same place that he always was. Why did this become such a big deal?
Because there are people inside his campaign who did want him to soften. There are people inside his campaign who understood that he has no path to victory unless he moves on this issue, unless he gets some Latino votes, and unless, by the way, he reassures college-educated voters white voters who tend to vote Republican, that he's reasonable on issues like this. So I think they went out, they spun the press, they said he's going to soften. He even went
He said it.
Yeah, he said
He suggested it, hinted it.
He suggested it after they planted the idea. And I assume there was a huge fight inside the campaign, and Trump's id won. But his id always wins.
Right. Yeah, I think it's a mistake of the Trump campaign to think there's any strategy or any plan. There is the daily whim of Donald Trump. So you have these advisors who will talk to the media, which is built to receive this kind of information. Oh, here's our clever narrative of change.
We love a process story, us in the press.
We're going to shift the website to all pictures of soccer, whatever that crap is. But the media is trained to kind of bark at those cookies. Trump, he's not on the same frequency. He's not checking with his advisors, what's the plan today? He's trying to figure out where to take the plane, the toy. And so he's out doing whatever he feels like. Yeah, wherever he feels like going. So there is no them there. There's just Trump and these people flittering around him who are talking to reporters.
I think we all agree, not a great summer for Donald Trump. Didn't do much to advance his cause, right? Has Hillary Clinton done anything affirmatively right, or is she just strictly the beneficiary of his issues, problems, self-inflicted wounds?
I think the Democrats ran a great convention.
Right.
I think from beginning to end, that convention was choreographed brilliantly. I don't think they could have predicted that the Khans would give the most, or Mr. Khan would give the most memorable and consequential speech of the whole exercise. The other thing I think she's done that's very smart is she's obeyed an old political adage. Never get in the way of a train wreck on the other side. And she hasn't felt the need, and this goes to what Mike was saying, she hasn't felt the need to chase the daily headline. She does have an overall strategic argument that she wants to make, and they've been doing it. And the other thing that they've done right, I think, is get out there with television advertising early, heavily, in the critical states, go into places like Arizona, open a field office in Utah. I think they've had a pretty good summer.
And yet her unfavorable ratings are now almost at his level, according to the ABC News Washington Post poll this summer. And she continues to have these overhang, and there are questions about the email, questions about the foundation. They won't go away. She can't somehow. Maybe that's just because the press harps on her, according to the left. That's what they say. But it seems to me that they have done various mechanical things pretty well, but she still remains an imperfect candidate.
Yeah, they are doing all the blocking and tackling right, but that's the easy part. You know, they're not doing big
Don't tell your clients that,
because no, I'm frank, that secret's out. But here, she could make her biggest problems a lot less if she would go to a secret laboratory and get a contrition gene inserted into her gene code. She just digs in on some of this stuff much more than she should, and she keeps creating this narrative which drives the can't trust Hillary thing, which is real. If it wasn't Donald Trump, a Republican with some accretive appeal, a Jeb Bush, a John Kasich, would be beating her now. Right. So I don't think they're doing that much to win, but they're letting Trump lose, and he's sure doing a great job.
But why is it still so tight in some of those really key battleground states if the thing is over, signed, sealed, delivered?
Well, North Carolina is a very iffy proposition. Right. Obama carried it once, lost it once. It was going to be very narrow anyway. All those states you mentioned, she could win without carrying a single one of them. Right. Because there are so many pathways for her as a Democrat.
Again, I don't really quite understand why it's so close in Nevada when she's up by 8 or 9 in Virginia. What explains that?
Well, the main thing I've learned in 28 years of reading polls for a living is be careful about completely trusting early polls, especially before the first debate. Right. They bounce around a lot.
We'll have more after this. We are back with more from my conversation with Democratic strategist Bob Shrum and Republican strategist Mike Murphy. I asked them to enter, in this part of the interview, into the realm of fantasy. If suddenly they were hired to work on Donald Trump's campaign, what advice would they give to the GOP nominee? You would tell him what truth that he needs to understand if he's ever going to have a chance of winning this election?
That he's not going to win. I
asked you to take it seriously.
No, but I would tell him that he's not going to win, and the way he conducts himself is going to have an enormous impact on how he's perceived for the rest of his life. Right. Beginning tomorrow, all the way through the concession speech, where he can't stand up there and say, "It was rigged, I was robbed."
Right.
It would never happen.
Yeah, I know. That's why I said fantasy.
Well, I'm going to give you the absolute honest answer, and it's a boring answer. I would say you lack the character to be president. You should drop out to save the party.
Debate prep. You would go to Donald Trump and you would say what?
Oh, this one's easy. You got to stop acting on instinct. You actually have to learn what you're going to do in this debate. You got to have a strategy. You have to practice. You have to learn issues.
Right.
And he wouldn't do any of it.
No shouting, no bullying, and try to present a picture of how everybody in America benefits from your presidency without anybody getting beaten up.
Your heart-to-heart with Hillary Clinton is what? The hard thing that she does not yet get.
You go out there and you seem to think that you're supposed to have a different persona when you're in public than when you're in private.
Right.
And the truth is your private persona is pretty terrific, and you got to let more and more of that show and be less guarded.
Right, you would tell her what?
Yeah, get out of the defensive crouch and stop being a bad actor on television pretending to be what you're not. 1. 2, tell your debate team the #1 negotiation point is no audience. So Trump is alone. Take away his oxygen. And 3rd, start the debate with something well written, not by you, you're a terrible writer, we all saw the speech. Something well written and short that frames him as a bully on the first minute of the debate and puts him back on his heels.
You know, one of the most colossal mistakes in American political history was Richard Nixon won the flip to decide who would go first in the first 1960 debate. And he said, oh, I'd like to go second, because he was a high school college debater, and he thought, I can refute anything he says. And Kennedy went out there and brilliantly set out his stall, his theme, his message, and Nixon ended up just responding. So I think that what she does in that first minute is really critical. She sets the tone.
Do you think she should try to play head games with him and try to get inside his head and make him blow up? Is that a reasonable thing to have a candidate try to do?
He'll blow up if you start winning.
Right.
You know, no three-dimensional chess. Now, I would put stand-up comedians on the road 2 weeks before doing an insult comedy tour about Trump, because he'd watch it on cable and go crazy.
What is the scenario? Again, I know you guys both think Trump's going to lose, but every game is a percentage game, right? There's some small percentage chance that Trump wins.
Sure, black swan. Right.
Yeah. So what's the scenario again that haunts you, given that you don't want him to win? What's the scenario that haunts you? What kind of thing could happen that would allow the black swan to come flapping its wings across the stage?
You know, the nightmare I have is an enormous flying saucer lands and an orange alien gets out and says, "Bring us your king," and we say, "We better get an orange guy quick," or the ray guns are coming out. Other than that scenario, which is alcohol infused, I would say some sort of late terrorist attack where there's a rage impulse and Trump is the hammer. Now, I think the other impulse will be sober leadership. So I'm not at all sure it would cut the Trump way, but that at least would, if we have a Paris-style attack in Chicago and Atlanta simultaneously and there's a national fury at the right time, is Trump the instrument of rage and revenge?
I think the problem with that is, A, that people might say, we can't, in this kind of volatile and dangerous situation, rely on someone like Donald Trump. And B, he'd sort of prove that case, as he did after Orlando, as he did after the shooting in Chicago the other day, by tweeting out, "See, I told you so, I'm right." So that everything is about him. It's never about the people who lose their lives.
All right, I got two really simple, like hard number kind of questions, or a hard name and a hard number. Who's the most valuable endorsement out there right now that if you were Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump is the endorsement you would want?
I think Colin Powell would be a very valuable endorsement for Hillary Clinton.
Right.
That may be a little problematical. There seems to be a little tension there. But I'll tell you, I don't know him very well. I know him a little. I can't imagine Colin Powell ever endorsing Donald Trump.
I'm not a big believer in endorsements, but if Trump were put on sanity pills and somehow really pivoted and all the dreams of a new improved Trump ever came true, which I will bet heavily against, George W. Bush saying, okay, this guy can be president of the United States late would have a huge impact.
Yeah, okay. And last, I'm not going to get you guys on the record right now here, the weekend before Labor Day. Hillary Clinton wins the election, because you both predicted that already. She wins the election with how many electoral votes?
348.
How many electoral votes?
326.
Wow.
I just made that up.
Murphy's is a lot. Murphy's are relatively tight. That's relatively tight. That's got Trump in the 200s.
Voters of Illinois love amusement, so I think they may vote. No, I haven't tried to look at it because I just see it losing, so I haven't tried to get into the details of the rubble.
But you don't. But
Can I
neither.
revise that?
But neither one of you sees her, for example, surpassing Barack Obama's electoral vote total in 2008.
I think if Trump keeps behaving this way, and she doesn't encounter a big bump in the road, she could win a lot more than 348 electoral votes. Right now, he's not ahead in any battleground state that I know of.
Right.
That's amazing. And Arizona is a tie.
He's put some Republican states in semi-play for them.
Thanks to Bob Shrum and Mike Murphy. When we come back, a season of hot weather and hot takes after this. Congratulations, you survived your second, yes, second, summer of Trump. For us here at Bloomberg Politics, the last couple months on the campaign trail flew by so fast we thought we'd take a moment on the eve of this Labor Day weekend to reflect back on all the plots, subplots, and sub-subplots of the Republican nominee's summer.
If you are saying he can't do his job because of his race, is that not the definition of racism?
No, I don't think so at all. He's a Mexican. We're building a wall between here and Mexico.
Many Republicans are watching this in horror.
Claiming a person can't do the job because of their race is sort of like the textbook definition of a racist comment.
The condemnation of the Speaker of the House of his own party's presumptive nominee is extraordinary. Get used to it. There's going to be more of it.
When I'm elected, I will suspend immigration from areas of the world where there is a proven history of terrorism against the United States.
I do not think a Muslim ban is in our country's interest. I do not think it is reflective of our principles, not just as a party, but as a country.
Right now, the biggest thing going on in this presidential race is a lot of the media and a lot of Republicans, mostly ones who don't want Trump to win, but including some who do, think that this thing is being cooked right now in a way that'll be difficult for Trump to recover from.
You know, the Republicans, honestly, folks, our leaders have to get tougher. This is too tough to do it alone. But you know what? I think I'm going to be forced to.
The notion that you can go it alone, that you can become the president of the United States as the nominee of the Republican Party with no help from anyone, it's all me, it's all going to be me, it's not in touch with reality.
Donald Trump used his signature line, "You're fired," today.
Donald Trump with a message for his campaign manager, "You're fired."
Why did Trump get rid of Corey Lewandowski?
After months of tension, having two people trying to run the campaign, bickering over personnel decisions, over how Trump operates, etc., Donald Trump's children and some other advisors convinced him that this had to be done now.
Hillary Clinton may be the most corrupt person ever to seek the presidency of the United States.
I thought the themes Trump chose about changing Washington, about the country not being able to rely on Hillary Clinton to change things, questioning her veracity, I thought those were all very well chosen, and I think he'll keep those up.
Our billionaire Republican presumptive nominee just so happened to be in the United Kingdom today. The presumptive Republican nominee reacted to the Brexit news.
I really do see a parallel between what's happening in the United States and what's happening here. Saddam Hussein was a bad guy, right? But you know what he did well? He killed terrorists.
The Saddam thing has gotten as much, if not more, attention than the stuff that he said about Hillary and her email practices and Comey and all that stuff.
It's the Republican sweepstakes speculation that has reached critical mass today. There are a lot of news outlets, including CBS News, reporting Pence is the choice for Trump. He is a steady influence. He's a policy guy. He's opposite of Trump in a lot of ways, and that will reassure people.
I have a great deal of respect for John McCain.
Do you think he went too far?
You could say yes. That's okay. On that one, you could say yes.
Clearly, this man is not a politician.
For a lot of people, the performance of the two of them on 60 Minutes was sort of cringe-inducing in some ways because you have Mike Pence saying these things about various issues that he doesn't clearly believe.
Melania, speech, plagiarism. Here's what happened. Twitter says she copied Michelle Obama.
This has set a lot of Republicans back to being concerned about the competence of the campaign. They have done nothing to turn the page on a narrative which is killing them.
Stand and speak and vote your conscience.
Everyone here is still talking about the fallout from last night, Ted Cruz's endorsement-less speech.
I think there's no doubt he heard Donald Trump.
I humbly and gratefully accept your nomination.
I thought it was pretty good, and I think it certainly ended the convention on a high note as compared to what they were facing just a day before.
Russia, if you're listening, I hope you're able to find the 30,000 emails that are missing.
There's no upside for Donald Trump to give ammunition to the Democrats in this moment. Gold Star families of U.S. service members killed in combat are now demanding an apology from the Republican nominee, who repeatedly tore into the appearance of Captain Khan's mother and father at the Democratic convention. As if all of this wasn't enough trouble for Donald Trump, his campaign is also dealing with a different controversy from over the weekend.
He's not going into Ukraine, okay? Just so you understand. He's not going to go into Ukraine.
Russia went into Ukraine 2 years ago. It was in the news. This is not a headline that you need to be a super expert to know about.
The campaign is in very good shape. We are organized. We are moving forward.
Make no mistake, while it could be worse, below the radar, below the scenes, there is panic in the Republican Party.
We're reducing your taxes from 35% to 15%. I am going to cut regulations massively.
More than he really ever has in this campaign, and since the general election started at least, he said, here is a coherent set of ideas that Republicans and he hopes others can get on board with.
If she gets to pick her judges, nothing you can do, folks. Although the Second Amendment people, maybe there is, I don't know.
He loves to be a showman. He loves to joke. This is a joke that was not appropriate.
I call President Obama and Hillary Clinton the founders of ISIS. They're the founders.
Ratings challenge that CNN report so seriously that I call President Obama and Clinton the founder of ISIS and MVP. They don't get sarcasm, which might help explain his new campaign slogan, Trump 2016, could I be any lower in the polls? Donald Trump has shaken up and expanded his senior staff with just 3 months left until Election Day. If Kellyanne Conway really gets on the plane with Trump, goes to events and keeps him focused, that improves his chances of winning.
Paul Manafort, the Trump campaign chair, out.
My father just didn't want to have the distraction looming over the campaign and, quite frankly, looming over all the issues that Hillary's facing right now.
You're living in poverty. Your schools are no good. You have no jobs. What the hell do you have to lose?
The nihilism of what do you have to lose? That's, as arguments go, I mean, you have to hand it to Trump for innovating.
El Donaldo flew to Mexico City for his first meeting with a foreign head of state.
We did discuss the wall. We didn't discuss payment of the wall. That'll be for a later date. We will build a great wall along the southern border, and Mexico will pay for the wall.
Coming up, a special with all due reflect on Hillary Clinton's summer when we come right back. The weather report in Hillaryland this summer was a little sunny, a little stormy, a little breezy, and definitely heated. Here, for your viewing pleasure, is a quick recap of Clinton's summer non-vacation.
I believe the person the Republicans have nominated for president cannot do the job.
It was a sustained attack on Trump, and she showed that she could do it with humor and, I would say, elegance, and despite what Trump said about her, pretty good performance skills. Last night, the Associated Press reported that according to their calculations, Clinton had reached the mega majestic magic number that she needs to advance the general election as her party's standard bearer.
Bridges are better than walls.
She leaves this race now with a bigger head of steam than a lot of people expected that she would.
Democrats have more confidence in her performance abilities than they've had in months.
I am fired up, and I cannot wait to get out there and campaign for Hillary.
The coordination between this president and his chosen successor is tighter on a staff level than anyone in modern history.
The Orlando terrorist may be dead, but the virus that poisoned his mind remains very much alive.
She's playing at a very high level now, and I think she still has room to grow. Her biggest weakness, as I started to say, is still the record.
I have clearly said that we faced terrorist enemies who use a perverted version of Islam to justify slaughtering innocent people. So if Donald suggests I won't call this threat what it is, he hasn't been listening. Economists on the right and the left and the center all agree Trump would throw us back into recession.
I thought this was solid, sharp, strong. It made the case that she wanted to make. Not as effective, I think, as that first one, that first speech, the foreign policy-driven one, partly because that one had the element of surprise.
I'm here today because I'm with her. Yes, her.
Does she look to you for that event like Hillary Clinton's running mate?
If Hillary Clinton was smart, she would consider Elizabeth Warren very seriously for this job.
After more than 2 years and $7 million spent by the Benghazi Committee out of taxpayer funds, it had to today report it had found nothing.
Republicans could not have played more into Hillary Clinton's hands and her campaign's hands on the thematics of how do you investigate a Clinton. The Clinton campaign is getting some blowback today for an ordinary and, in another way, extraordinary private conversation on Monday between Bill Clinton and the Attorney General of the United States, Loretta Lynch.
Bad judgment, horrible judgment.
This will add to the partisan tint on the decision in a way that was unnecessary.
Although we did not find clear evidence that Secretary Clinton or her colleagues intended to violate laws governing the handling of classified information, there is evidence that they were extremely careless. We are expressing to justice our view that no charges are appropriate in this case.
The story here is binary. Indictment or no indictment. If Hillary Clinton was indicted, or Director Comey suggested that criminal charges should be brought against her, recommended that, this would be one of the worst days in Hillary Clinton's life. She might not be the Democratic nominee and might not be the President of the United States.
Please join me in welcoming the President of the United States, Barack Obama.
The crowd here was in love with what they saw on stage, and the Clinton people were in love with it too. They think that's very powerful, that he was once a critic of hers, now as a convert, they think that is a big, powerful political plus.
No reasonable prosecutor would bring the second case in 100 years focused on gross negligence. Should have known, must have known, had to know, does not get you there.
Hillary Clinton, I think, won the day. Comey helped her a lot, but so did the Republicans on the committee, who just weren't ready to have the kind of strategy. It wasn't as bad as the Benghazi hearing, but they did not have the strategy.
Hillary Clinton will make an outstanding president, and I am proud to stand with her today.
It's already a rocking, raucous, and rollicking convention, and we're just getting started here. Supporters of Sanders, infuriated by the revelations brought to light by the DNC's WikiLeaks email leak this weekend.
Can I just say, to the Bernie or bust people, you're being ridiculous.
I move that Hillary Clinton be selected as the nominee of the Democratic Party for President of the United States.
I accept your nomination.
The Democratic Convention may, in its total composition, all of those speakers across those nights prosecuting that case and that frame is the reason why I think it's been more successful than the Cleveland Convention.
Director Comey said that my answers were truthful, and what I've said is consistent with what I have told the American people.
This email thing has taken a huge toll on Hillary Clinton. She has paid a big political price.
These emails show a pattern of Clinton Inc. doing exactly what the critics suggest, which is moving stuff along so that everybody wins, except in some cases, critics would argue, the American people.
Hillary understands that the most damaging thing to a parent is to look at a talented child or a sick child or a child in need and not be able to do anything.
The biggest hole they need to fill quickly is around the Clinton Foundation. This has been something that has been teed up for years. The fact that the Clinton campaign is still taking those foreign donations at this point seems highly questionable as a piece of strategy.
Right. Today, the AP reported that more than half Hillary Clinton's meetings with people outside of the government while she was Secretary of State were with individuals who gave money to the Clinton Foundation in some way. It is clearly the case that if there is ever a quid pro quo that gets established where a donor asked for something and the State Department changed foreign policy on that, it's going to be explosive. We don't have that yet, but there is still something seedy.
Donald Trump has built his campaign on prejudice and paranoia. He is taking hate groups mainstream.
They have gotten very good at flipping the bit, at getting people to focus on Trump because he gives them so much ammunition.
You don't build a coalition by insulting our friends or acting like a loose cannon. You do it by putting in the slow, hard work of building relationships.
Coming up, our most scintillating, fascinating summer interviews. And if you're watching us in Washington, D.C., you can also listen to us on the radio at Bloomberg 99.1 FM. We'll be right back. Over the course of the summer, we've heard from a lot of different voices, politicians, writers, entertainers. So here are some of our favorite moments from the past couple months. There are an incredible array of good stories in this book. What's the most relevant story in the book to understanding what's happening in 2016?
Oh, you got to go to Wallace in '68, just because Wallace tapped into an anger and a disappointment with regular blue-collar workers and the elites, and got really at the crux of it, which was that the fancy pants elites makes all these decisions that you pay for, and we're not going to stand for it anymore. And I feel like that is a very similar sentiment. Then, of course, you get the idea that Wallace was basically, the voters always said he speaks his mind. There was this sense that, this sense that Wallace said something other people weren't.
The first presidential candidate I covered was Bill Clinton, and I thought, wow, presidential candidates are really interesting and great speakers, and they work 20 hours a day. Your first presidential candidate, equally unusual.
Yes.
Trump. So what gives us sort of the sense of your article about what it's like to cover him day to day?
It's a wild roller coaster ride, or as I said in the article, a hurricane making landfall on a daily basis. You never know what's going to happen with Trump. You cover him. I mean, you could be doing one story up until 5:30 that day, and 6:30 is when nightly news comes around, and he will tweet something or say something that upends the entire process. I mean, I don't think I ever thought in my life that I would hear somebody running for president say that somebody else was schlonged.
I think you're going to see more pop culture in politics, more what in the movie business that we call pre-aware titles move into this space. But I think the voters, after the Trump thing, are going to develop more of a filter where maybe a Kardashian is not such a good idea, but somebody who's done their homework, like a Clooney on the left or a Gary Sinise on the right, could be an attractive candidate.
ESPN at some point came to you and said, make a long-form doc, and we want it to be on O.J. Simpson, right?
Correct.
You were not thrilled by that topic initially.
Correct.
What turned you around?
The idea that they came to me with this larger canvas, which was, we want to do 5 hours. And as soon as I started thinking about the 5 hours part of it, what I was reluctant to do was a story about his guilt or innocence or a regurgitation of the trial. So as soon as it happened that I realized that I had a bigger canvas to work with, I said, oh, I can tell a story about LA, about race in America and race in Los Angeles, about who OJ was from a racial and identity standpoint, story about the LAPD, a story about all these things that actually I am interested in and that I feel like have been overlooked in explaining the events of 94 and 95.
If Donald Trump were not our nominee and Hillary just had the last couple of days like she did, our nominee would be up 10 points. And if Hillary were not the nominee and there were another Democrat, I mean, she's obviously very, very flawed, running against a guy like Trump, the Democratic nominee would probably be up 15 points. But right now we have these two very flawed candidates, and I think it's tragic for the Republicans that yet we're reminded of another missed opportunity that seems to be the theme of the cycle.
Evaluate how the convention has gone from the point of view of uniting the party behind Donald Trump.
I think we're moving in the right direction. I think coming out of this week, we're going to be largely united, if not entirely. And that's important because in the end, you know, a united party is not enough. Republicans don't make up a majority in this country any more than do Democrats. We've got to come out of here ready to appeal to moderates, to independents, and even disaffected Democrats who want change.
Where do the people from your state, the Bernie people from Minnesota, stand now? What's their sort of mood as they approach the last inning, prepare to leave town?
Well, we have had an incredibly positive mood in our delegation. We worked really hard. Maybe we're a caucus state and we're kind of used to this. We're used to some protests. Nothing's always rosy. But Keith Ellison, who introduced Bernie as a congressman from our state, we announced our delegate count together. And we both worked really hard to make sure that we come together. And I think you'll see that, saw that in our delegation. Of course, you're going to get people yelling here and there. It's a convention. It's the Democratic Party. But I think overall this notion that people that want to do something about climate change are going to go support a guy that says it's a hoax perpetrated by the Chinese, or someone that wants to do more with diplomacy is going to go over and support a guy that just said that basically told Russia to engage in espionage. I mean, this doesn't feel like the Bernie supporters to me.
Was there any time during the Democratic nomination fight you thought she might lose to Bernie Sanders?
I can't say that I wasn't nervous, but I never thought that she would lose. And once I thought about it, it was just like in a general. People call, God, did you see this? And I get nervous, and then I come back and I think about, well, if you have to have this much of this and that much of that, then I don't get nervous.
This is what makes me qualified. One of the biggest challenges this country faces is the threat of Islamist terrorism. I am the only credible candidate who has any experience whatsoever, firsthand, fighting terrorists. I know exactly what needs to be done to defeat ISIS and other such groups, and on day one, I can start that process. I have 100% confidence in that. I have zero doubt. This is my wheelhouse.
I'll make you a deal. I'll make you a deal. I'll look you in the eye, telling you I will look him in the eye, and I will ask him to release his tax returns if Hillary Clinton releases all the transcripts from the Wall Street speeches and
There's no precedent for that, though.
33,000 emails. How about 30? I want the 33,000 emails.
No precedent.
I want some smart person. Right, of course she did, Mark. But some smart kid out in Silicon Valley, they can get them for us.
What's
You're on. I'll pay you.
chance that Trump will win?
Oh, looking at the August polls, it's 20 or less. Like, there's no question about it.
20% that a major party candidate would win.
No. He said, what's the percentage when I look at the polls today? If you took all the swing states,
20%.
Hillary is winning by a dominant thing. But I'll also say exactly what you said, to be fair, right? It's August, and I think there's plenty of time.
You're both numbers people. I want to get numbers from both of you. What is Trump's floor in the popular vote?
Oh, it's 40-some%, 42, 43% for any major party.
What's ceiling in the popular vote?
With Gary Johnson and Jill Stein on the ballot?
Four-way.
Her ceiling is about 47%.
Oh, then you'll win.
we could win.
Eventually, everyone gets tired. Eventually, everyone gets exhausted from it, you know. And unfortunately, that usually is the voting public. And that once the election is over with, everyone's exhausted, so no one wants to be involved anymore. But my hope is that a show like Hamilton keeps that interest peaked, keeps those 15-year-old, 16-year-old kids saying, I'm going to go ahead and pay a little bit more attention in civics class. I'm going to figure out a little bit more about what happened before I was born so that I can understand the context, have a context for what's happening now.
We'll be right back. Many thanks to my friend Margaret Talev out there in Washington for helping me close out the summer. Time for you to head over to BloombergPolitics.com right now for all of our coverage of Bloomberg's exclusive interview with Vladimir Putin. Margaret, what are you doing this weekend?
Lots of pool time. I'm trying to stay off the campaign trail for another few days if I can pull it off.
Okay, work on that. Make sure you get that done. Sounds like a good weekend agenda from Margaret, me, and all of our friends here at Bloomberg Politics. We say to you, sayonara.
I'm Taylor Riggs, and you're watching Bloomberg West. Let's start with a check of your Bloomberg First Word News. The FBI released details of its investigation into Hillary Clinton's use of private email while Secretary of State. Findings show at least 100 State Department employees had Clinton's private email address. Clinton has denied she was using private email to avoid federal open record laws. Donald Trump met with African-American leaders in Philadelphia today, a day before he visits a church in Detroit. Trump's roundtable with local leaders comes as the Republican nominee is working to appeal to minority voters. The only president Uzbekistan has had since splitting from the Soviet Union has died of a stroke. The Uzbek government says Islam Karimov will be buried tomorrow in the ancient city of Samarkand. He was 78 years old. A South Carolina official says Tropical Storm Hermine has brought scattered reports of flooded roads, downed trees and power outages, but no major damage. Hermine weakened to tropical storm strength as it moved across the southeast. The system could hit coasts of Connecticut and Rhode Island through Labor Day. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,600 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Taylor Riggs. This is Bloomberg. Bloomberg West is next.
This is Bloomberg West. Coming up, Vladimir Putin rejects accusations his government hacked the Democratic Party, but he says whoever did do it did the public a favor. Our exclusive interview with the president of Russia. Plus, Baidu's vision of the future includes robot taxis and digital personal assistants in every home. Our interview with Chief Executive Robin Li this hour. And Samsung's latest bid to fend off Apple may be going up in flames, literally. We will break down its major global recall this hour. First, to our lead. Russian President Vladimir Putin said the hacking of thousands of Democratic National Party emails and documents was